Hello. It's 4:20 and let's get high. Right. I want to say first off, better call me tomorrow after this show. That's going to work better. Okay, so I was thinking, I get up early in the morning and I study Zohar. And the Zohar, goes according to the first 5 books of the Torah. And the first 5 books of the Torah, they're separated into weekly portions. If you learn each weekly portion, at the end of the year, you finish the entire Torah. And the Jewish people throughout the world, do that every day. And the Zohar also goes according to that kind of sectioning off. And even though the whole things they're talking about are just very kind of just, barely connected to what goes on in that weekly's portion. But every now and then it does come back to it, and it'll explain certain things, and when the Zohar explains certain things, it's usually to give you a very different perspective. And so one of the things that I was learning about today, which I thought that I should, try to remember, so I could pass it on. A lot of times in learning Zohar is kind of the experience for the moment. And I can't possibly remember this stuff, I just know that I learned it. It's like going to a party and maybe you drank too much and, you had a good time, can't quite remember what you did or something like that. But it's that kind of experience, kind of a little out of body experience. So it's talking about the Ketoret. And the Ketoret were made of 7 different spices, like frankincense and myrrh, those kind of things, really ancient stuff that people used to, take back and forth between countries. And, that was, it was worth something. Maybe it wasn't worth so much here because there was a lot of it. You take it over there and, people want it. And there's very, very precise instructions about how to mix these 11 different spices together to make the ingredients on which the inner altar, where the inner altar in the inner part of the temple is where it was burnt. And it was the first thing burnt. First thing they did, they burnt the incense. It's sort of like, you get up and the first thing, like particularly if you live kind of in the small quarters, a lot of times, people get up, first thing they do is they burn some incense, get the, and so it explains in the Zohar, and it's interesting because, people have asked often, do people smoke herb in the Zohar? Is there anything in the Zohar in the Torah about people smoking herb? And so actually herb, marijuana, is one of the ingredients of, Zanarine made the incense, also made the oil on which everything was covered. In other words, they anointed everything. Everything was covered with this oil. And a large part of this oil was marijuana. They reduced it down to oil, and they put it on there. And then they had the incense, and the incense would make smoke. And of course, Ashan, the word for smoke in Hebrew, is an acrostic to Olam, Shan, and Nefesh, to world, time, and soul, and has a gematria of 420. And 42 has a lot also to do with, anyways, this whole process, but, previous world, known by 42. Anyway, but I don't want to so much go there. I want to stick to the subject here about smoke. And so it says that, the Jewish people, so we have 12 tribes. But one of the tribes, the tribe of Levi, is a special tribe in that the tribe of Levi has a part of their genealogy sort of carved out, and these are like the highest people amongst the Jewish people. They're known as being high. And because of that, they were the ones who would work in the temple, and all the things that had to be officiated, they did it. And they were like the smartest ones. They're the ones, they kept the Torah, they kept everything straight. Someone came with some fakakta idea, they showed them the Torah, can't be like that. That was the Kohanim. And it says that and amongst the Kohanim, there was the Kohen Gadol, the great Kohen, the highest Kohen of them all. And what did he do? His biggest job was to take this incense into the Holy of Holies, where there were the 10 Commandments. And see, the 10 Commandments, they were a trip. Because the 10 Commandments were like, they were like 3 cubits wide. And they were put in a room which was 2 cubits wide, 10 cubits wide. And you measured the room, it was 10 cubits. You measured from each side of the Aron, which was 3 cubits, and measured 5 to each wall. Because this was a place that was sort of beyond time and space. And the Kohen Gadol would go in there on one day in the year, on the day of Yom Kippur. And there he would make this smoke of incense, and he would go into the smoke. And through that, he would rise up to God. And God's everywhere, but would, rise up into heaven and, bring down blessings for the world, and, get closer to the light of God. And they come down, and when the Kohen Gadol would come out, his face would be like, there's all these different things we said on Yom Kippur, how the brightness of his face was, like lightning, and like all these different metaphors for how this guy looked. And that's kind of the thing, that people at that time were so sensitive that they wouldn't even consider taking smoke inside of them, but they would go inside of the smoke. And as what the Zohar was talking about, that inside of the smoke, that's how a person can elevate, can get high. And what is it about the smoke that does that? That it pushes away negativity. And see, that's really, I've always wondered, what is this thing about getting high? I know when I get high that I feel like the earth has less gravity, that all these things that are pulling at me, that they can't pull at me anymore. They don't have like access to me because I'm high. And here I see in the Zohar talking about a very similar thing, but saying, no, it's not the gravity. is that there's much negativity in our world, particularly these days, where just everybody is so confused and there's so little kindness. I mean, there is kindness, thank God, but it's not a lot. It's a few people being kind, and I don't know. It bothers me that people are they're so concerned about animals, but not about human beings, and I've never really got that. But um, but so there's a lot of negativity around us, and when you get high, that cloud, that incense, um, uh, protects you from that. And suddenly you see, hey, if it wasn't for all that negativity, I'd be this happy, go-free guy, man. And I'd have a very different outlook on the world. And unfortunately, that things are very negative, and we've become a much cruder human being, and now we have to actually take the smoke inside of us, and that'll get us high. But it's important to get high, and the Zohar says, particularly, it says it a few times. I thought it was pretty cool that it says that because there were two altars. The inner altar was where they burn the ketoret, the spices, and it says because of this, there were no flies, no bugs at all in the whole base of Migdash, even though it was flowing with blood and they were killing animals and there were no flies. And they actually found some of this stuff, I think maybe back in the 50s, they found a few kilos of it that had been hidden there, and the rabbis wouldn't let them put match to it because that's, only the Kohen Gadol can do that. We don't have one. But they did allow them to burn a little bit of it with electricity. And just even before they burned it, just to be around it, it went into their clothes, and everyone started becoming just high, just really happy and euphoric, and they noticed that all the bugs left. And this is like sort of, it's documented stuff, and so but it's interesting how in that time back there, they could just go into the cloud of smoke, or, when they had it in the temple, just people would just go in there and just, be inside of this, dispersion of smoke throughout the temple, and it made people high. Meaning that it made them impervious to all the negativities that maybe they have done or other people have done that were going around the world. And you just said, man, none of that matters, which is one of the things, the reasons we get high. So we should be able to feel that we're just like, that things seem to suck, but then you get high and you're like, wow, man, things aren't so bad. And why? Because you don't have all that negativity pulling on you. So, and it says that, that just like in the temple, the first thing they did was the ketoret, in the same way that the person should do this. And it's actually, we speak on it. We mention all these things in the very beginning of prayer, because that is before prayer, which is the outer altar, where that's where they sacrifice animals, and the animal being sacrificed is related to the animal inside the human being that gets out of line and does things wrong, and because of that we sacrifice animals, and we should have that compassion feeling of the animal that the animal's actually dying because of us, which is really a very, true thing. And as we see in our world now, that all, the animals are going extinct and are just dying and suffering because of us. And one of the things of sacrificing an animal on the altar was to remind the person of this, that your actions are killing life in the world, and that this would help a person to reform their ways. And so that's considered prayer. There are certain times they did it, and they did it in the morning, and they did it late in the afternoon, and that's how we pray, in the morning, late afternoon. And but it says before you do that, because the only way, in order to pray, one must have. You can't go into prayer being depressed. As long, and I'm not in any way pretending to be like this, but as long as we are in the world, we should take it as a just a great honor, no matter what's going on. And when you go before God asking for what you need, so one should do it with a happy heart, and not with depression because what's going on around me, have pity on me, give me something. That's not how we want to go before God. We want to take care of our business, and we want to go before God with a happy heart, purity, and just trust. That's what I was looking for. Trust in God, and we should be happy. But it's not always easy to get to that point in in one's being, because things on the outside can really bother us and really make it very difficult to focus. And so the advice of the Zohar is go into the smoke. First, go into the smoke. Get high, then pray. So that's what I wanted to say. And if any of the two people out there wanted to comment, feel free. After all that, I'm just going to have a little bit more to smoke here. I've been working a lot these days. Usually I go out and walk for a couple of miles every day, and I just haven't been doing it. But on the other hand, I've been getting a lot done, and I'm very happy about that. And I know all of this is going to, make reward in the, in the future. I feel like I'm building something, really stable. My life has become very stable. I've never had such a stable life like this. And even though, I live in a small little place, little back house, but, I don't own anything. Most of the things here, are not mine, the big furniture and stuff. And I have everything I do own in this little place. And everything has its place, see? And every time I find a little better way of putting stuff, a little bit more expedient, I feel so good, because life has just become very simple, and everything that I need is here and exactly where I need it. And stores are closed. I like to walk, so I go out and walk to the stores and get what I need. And it's just it reminds me, of Yaakov, that he was the third of the patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It was from Yaakov's 12 sons came the 12 tribes. And Yaakov had a very difficult life. His whole life was difficult until the end. He went down to Egypt. He spent 17 years in Egypt, and 17 is gematria good. And it says that in the end of his life, everything was good. Once he went down to Egypt, he started to stop fighting with everyone, his brother, his uncle, so many problems this poor man had. And finally goes down to Egypt because his son, who he thought was dead for 20 years, he thought he was dead, and he comes out and finds out he's the king. And he can have anything that he wants. And he can bring down all of his children and grandchildren, and they can stay in Egypt and become a nation. And that's what happened. We stayed there for 210 years. And then came out, the famous splitting of the sea was like the birth of the Jewish nation, going through like the water breaking, going through the sea, and coming out and being a nation. And there were clouds of smoke, But the whole smoke thing is very big throughout Torah, both clouds and smoke. And the advice is, before you pray smoke, get high. It's a good thing to do because for a little while you don't have all this negativity grabbing at you, and you can actually be maybe more genuine. A lot of times, if it's just grabbing at you, it's hard to be genuine. Hi, Wendy. Yes, this is the end of Yaakov. Wendy, thank you for your question. And yes, what I'm talking about is at the end of Vayakal, just before Pekude. Pekude is the end of Shmot, and this is the one just before. It's a very long parsha, but this is right at the end. And very interesting stuff. You can look it up in your English Zohar and check it out. It's hard to read. It's just so hard to remember things. As you read stuff in the Zohar, and it's just so far out, and it just explains so much. But then you go on, and it's like it's like being high. That you remember this, remember that. Sure. And remember, this happens, that happens. It's just the greatest. All of a sudden, that's the greatest thing, and it washes away everything that was. And it's all, Zohar is very, very powerful stuff. But sometimes, and also your own learning Zohar, some of it comes easy, and it just reads, and it's beautiful, and you get the sense that I'm at that level that it reveals itself to me. And other stuff is just, I have no idea what this is talking about. And sometimes even the words, I quite understand how the words are being meant. But the thing is, with Zohar, I think my experience of Zohar, because I just published my book, Zohar Beyond the Black Hole, that the Zohar is a place that you just have to dive in. You just dive in. And to me, when I dove into the Zohar, it just compels you to go further and further. And it's a very long book because you get a little here and you get a little there, and you kind of see something that's going on, and you want to go further and further until you finish the whole book. It could take actually years to finish the whole book. And then after you finish the whole book, you have you have these memories of these things that just blew your mind. And there's nothing more you can do except go back and read it again. And each time that you read it and you get more familiar with how the Zohar speaks, and how different words are used, that all of a sudden, the Zohar can just open up to a person, and there's so much light in the Zohar, even if you don't understand it. And if you do understand, particularly if you're understanding it in its original language, then there's a light that comes out of heaven. What can I say? And it's very powerful, and 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 yeah, it's very powerful, and you have to get used to it. It's not, just because it's enjoyable and it's fascinating. It also kind of takes a toll on a person. And it's like swimming, you got to lift your head sometimes and, breathe some air. And sometimes you have to do that. I mean, sometimes you just have to stop. And I'll do it. I'll stop. I'll pick up my phone. I'll look at the news, and just to sort of get myself back on Earth, and sort of um, assess, like, you know where I am, what it's done to me. And it can take a toll on the person. It really can. Let's see. Well, there is a place. And I say, I've been starting to give them. I don't give money out very often, but these are called. I have to get the address of these guys, but they're called. I think it's Sephira, Sephiria, Sephira, something like that. I have to look. And they're doing an amazing job. They're taking all of the Torah, and that's a lot. They're just taking all the books they can, just book after book, and they're translating them. It's all online, but they're translating them, and I mean, it's really making all this information available to everybody. I don't think you have to, you don't have to pay anything. I do, just because I think it's really, I think it's a really cool thing. And, I guess we all have different people we want to support. I support a writers group here, not that low, but I just feel I'm a writer, and, in some way or another, we should support one another. I think it's important. And particularly Jewish people, who are known as the people of the book. And here these dudes are helping people get all this information into the world. And so, yeah, I really think that's the best place. And I mean, there are these books that claim to translate it into English. And I found in one of them, and it just really bothered me, that they had rearranged the original words of the Zohar, the vein of Bishalek, and then translated it. So the whole thing made no sense to me whatsoever. I was in someone's house, and they handed me this, and to translate it, you see if I translate it, and I just said, I can't even read this. It just didn't seem like Zohar. And I went home, I looked at my Zohar, and sure enough, the words had been rearranged. So I don't know. It comes to Torah, we're generally, it's like kosher. You have to have someone who knows something say, yeah, this is a good thing. And particularly in Zohar. So these guys at Sephira, they're really on the ball. And, when it comes to this kind of stuff, all the Jewish scholars kind of watch over each other that no one should make a mistake because this is the Torah. This is, the entire Jewish people are based on the Torah, and the Torah hasn't changed in 3,500 years, and and all the traditions and the 613 commandments, man, all this stuff, man. So, anyways, I see it's already 30 minutes. Well, time flies while you're having fun. All right. Bye, you guys.